China shocked. U.S. spy planes posing as airliners to destroy PLA in South China Sea. Beijing has accused the U.S. of disguising the identities of its warplanes as civilian aircraft to spy on China at least 100 times this year, describing it as a serious security threat. It's a common trick for the U.S. Air Force to impersonate the transponder code of civilian aircraft from other countries. It is of a vile nature, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Wenbin said earlier this week. China urged the U.S. to immediately stop such dangerous provocations, to avoid accidents from happening in the sea and air. Wang described Chinese records of American spy plane activity in the area as incomplete. His remarks appeared to confirm a report by Beijing think tank the South China Sea Strategic Situation Probing Initiative or SCSPI, which it said showed U.S. planes were electronically disguising themselves as civilian aircraft from Malaysia while flying over the disputed waterway. Malaysia has not confirmed or responded to the claim. According to the SCSPI, which monitors activity in the South China Sea, between September 8 to 10 U.S. spy planes disguised as Malaysian aircraft flew over the disputed Paracel Islands as well as the sensitive Taiwan Strait and the Yellow Sea near the Chinese coast, basing its conclusions on open-source aviation responder records. This undoubtedly added up to great risk and uncertainty to international flight safety, which could lead to misjudgment by ground air defense systems and probably bring danger to civilian aircraft, especially those being impersonated, the think tank said in its report. All planes registered with the International Civil Aviation Organization or ICAO are assigned a unique 6-digit code called a hex code which rarely changes. The code is transmitted by an aircraft's transponder when interrogated by air traffic control radar. If the device is turned off or reconfigured, there is a danger of misidentification and even a mid-air collision. One of the best-known incidents of misidentification occurred in 1983 when Korean Airlines Flight 007 was shot down by the Soviet Union Air Force, killing all 269 on board. The civilian plane was mistaken for a U.S. spy plane after an RC-135 was observed crossing its flight path in Soviet airspace. Last month, a source told the South China Morning Post that a U.S. E-8C spy plane had initially been identified as a commercial airliner until it flew near the province of Guangdong on the southern Chinese coast. The U.S. Air Force, which has stepped up its activities in the South China Sea in recent months, uses commercial aircraft platforms for several of its planes. The RC-135 is based on a Boeing 707 which allows them to take civilian cover. The SCSPI report said over 3 straight days in September it recorded the disappearance of reconnaissance planes soon after they left U.S. airbases in Okinawa and Guam. Later, at the same heights and flight paths, aircraft with codes identifying them as Malaysian flew in suspicious patterns or to destinations not usually associated with civilian routes, it said. As additional evidence for its conclusion, the report said a U.S. Air Force tanker aircraft had left the Andersen Air Base in Guam for the South China Sea on September 10, at the same time as one of the reconnaissance planes, suggesting aerial refueling. In late August, SCSPI also used open-source aircraft identification information to claim a US EP-3E reconnaissance aircraft may have landed in Taiwan. This was later denied by Taiwanese authorities as totally against the facts. SCSPI said the U.S. Air Force had a track record of changing transponder numbers on its aircraft to those of civilian planes for undercover reconnaissance in places like Iran or Venezuela. Hong Kong-based military commentator Song Zhongping said a U.S. spy plane with a fake identity could reach military or civilian targets within Chinese airspace, getting as close as possible to the coastline without attracting the attention of PLA air defenses. They pretended to be Malaysian because that is a South China Sea nation and has relatively good relations with China, so it would be less likely to raise a flag, he said. Song added disguising warplanes as civilian aircraft not only violated the Convention on International Civil Aviation, but also the China-US Code of Safe Conduct on Naval and Air Force Encounters, signed in 2014. This shows how much the US Armed Forces are keen to know the PLA's deployment and are preparing for potential military actions. Earlier last month, a US surveillance plane flew into a declared no-fly zone over a Chinese military exercise in the Yellow Sea, prompting a protest from China's defense ministry. Meanwhile, China knows its navy cannot match the US military, but its People's Liberation Army should have the confidence to defeat the US should a conflict occur off the shores of China. The editorial emerged after US Defense Secretary Mark Esper remarked that China's navy is no match for that of the US in terms of strength, and that even if the US stopped building new ships, it would take China years to match capability on the high seas. China very much agree with this assessment. There is indeed a wide gap in the naval capability of the Chinese and US navies. China is aware it cannot defeat the US Navy in the event of a conflict in the South Pacific or the Indian Ocean. However, in China's adjacent waters, or the regions that concern China's core interests, the US Navy is destined to gradually lose its dominance. The PLA should have the confidence to defeat the US military in these areas when a conflict occurs. Seen as a mouthpiece of the Communist Party of China and government, said Washington should not see China as a threat if it believes China's navy is weaker. The political news portal added that the US elites are disturbed by China's goal to complete the modernization of its national defense and armed forces by 2035, and to build a world-class military by 2049. But we believe we should not wait until 2035 to realize a strong and effective deterrent against the US military in China's offshore waters, and should suppress the US military's arrogance in China's offshore waters as soon as possible. Chinese society will support their government to boost China's above-mentioned capacity building with greater efforts, so that China won't be bullied by the US in our coastal waters, and to safeguard China's national security. The US was also urged to change its calculation formula when it comes to security. The South China Sea and the Taiwan Straits cannot be treated by the US on par with the Caribbean Sea. If the US wants to subdue China in the latter's offshore waters, Washington must know it will be costly. In the long run, it is an unbearable weight on the US. When the country pursues goals way beyond its capabilities due to its greed, it will turn from being a real tiger to a paper tiger.